Hi guys, Freddy here. Welcome back to the desktop for another rules breakdown. And for some reason this week, Usagi Yojimbo's been on my mind. Now, it might be because I've picked up these two lovely volumes, which got delivered, which are the latest two, and in lovely full colour for the first time. Absolutely gorgeous, so I'll be reading those in a couple of days. But mainly because I've already covered the 1998 Gold Rush Games version of the Usagi Yojimbo Role-Playing Game, but this is the 2005 Sanguine Productions role-playing game based on Usagi Yojimbo, and it's a very different beast indeed. Now, unfortunately, the rulebook has a bunch of sample characters at the back. So we've got Usagi Yojimbo himself and a bunch of others, but the two that I would like to use as sample are Jinrozo and Kamatoto. Now, skills are listed here with different marks. As your marks go up, it increases the dice size. So, for 2 marks, you get a d6. If we go back to page 84, we can see the different marks and dice size. So, 1 gives you a d4, 2 gives you a d6, 3 gives you a d8, 4 gives you a d10, 5 gives you a d12, and then it resets. So you keep the d12 from having 5, but now you're 5 and 1, so you're adding a d4. And that's the way it works. So at 10, you've got 2d12 because it's 2, 5. At 15, you've got 3d12 because it's 3 times 5. And so on and so forth. Now, you're taking dice from various sources for rolls. So, for example, for observation here, Jinrozo has a d8 plus a d6 from his career. Plus, for observation, it would probably be mind. So he'd be rolling 2d8 plus a d6. Whereas Kamatoto, let's say she's trying to sneak, gets a d6 and her body of d6. So she's rolling 2d6. So she rolls, she gets a 2, and she gets a 2. So Jinrozo here needs to beat a 2. He just needs to beat her highest dice to succeed. So to Observer, he rolls, and he rolls a 1. He rolls an 8, and then he rolls his last one, which was the d6, and he rolls a 5. So he has 2 successes there, because he has rolled 2 dice over her highest. So not only has she failed to sneak, but she has failed badly to sneak because he beat her with his observation. Now, we kind of have set target numbers as well, if we go back to page 98. So if a character is just trying to do something and it's not a contested roll, we've got trivial rolls, which are 1d4 or a 2. Routine, 2d4 or 3. Easy, 2d6 or 4. Medium, 2d8 or 5-3. So like 2 successes there. Hard, 2d10 or a 6 and a 4. Very hard, 2d12 or 7 and a 4. Near impossible, 3d12 or an 8 and a 5. So a character trying to beat a medium roll, either the Game Master would roll 2d8, or the person would have to beat a target number of 5. Now, the reason it gives 2 numbers is in case they roll under that. So their failure would not just be an ordinary failure, it would be a failure plus 1. Now, the other thing is a botch. So if you roll all 1s, then you have botched and something catastrophic happens. So if we flip back to the previous page here, we can see worst of all worlds, botching. A roll of all 1s is the worst you can do. Such a roll is called a botch, and is the worst you can possibly do. Some contests have specific results for botches. We also have overwhelming failure here. So not only have you just failed, but you've got an overwhelming, where the opponent's 2 best dice have scored higher than your single best dice. You could fall from a tree and injure yourself. You could stumble right off the edge of a chasm. You could make the mob even angrier with what you said to them. Overwhelming failure doesn't always have side effects. For example, either you find that clue or you don't. Now, rolls can also be modified up or down. So if the Games Master thinks you have a higher than better chance of doing something, he will give you a bonus dice. So he might give you an extra d8 to roll. But likewise, if he thinks you stand a higher chance of failing because circumstances are bad, you're trying to do something in the middle of a gale or whatever, then against your target number, he will add something to the other side. So he'll be rolling, instead of 2d8, maybe we're rolling 3d8 for the medium difficulty. Also, the system has limits. So if you're carrying too much, then your dice size might be capped. So you might be rolling a d12, but you can't get higher than a d8. Literacy limit. If you can't read, then no dice can be higher than your biggest literacy die. Riding limit. None of your attack dice can be larger than the largest riding die. So you're limited by situation to only rolling dice below a certain size. Now, initiative in the system's a little odd. So if we flick over to the initiative section here, in sequence, players always take their characters' turns before the game host does, but focus allows folks to interrupt one another. Because what you do when you're rolling your initiative, so we look here for the character, and they have a d8 and a d4. And this one has a d8 and a d4 as well. And depending on the situation, you might be rolling on different target numbers. So if you're being ambushed, then your target number is an 8 and a 4. If it's a neutral standoff, your target numbers are 4. If you're ambushing someone, then target numbers are 2. So we've got an 8 and a 4. So where's my d8? D8's there. My d4's there. So Jinrozu is rolling these 2 dice. He gets 2 2s. So does not succeed. Kamatoto rolls the same and gets a 1 and a 2. So she doesn't succeed. Now, what does that mean? Well, we've got individual initiative targets here. So if they botched or did an overwhelming failure, so they did get 2 below that, then they're left reeling. Now, reeling's a situation where you can't act. You can't spend focus until you get your action, when you may restore from reeling. So basically, you've lost your action that round. An ordinary failure means you can react, whereas a tie or a success or an overwhelming success means you gain focus. Now, focus allows you to do various things. So what can focus do? You can interrupt. So when somebody else is acting, you can decide to spend your focus to interrupt their action. So even if your enemy's attacking you first, you can interrupt their action to fight them back. You can counter-interrupt. So if you're fighting somebody who interrupts you and you've got focus, then you can interrupt back and still go first. Or you can do a focused attack. Well, a focused attack means that if you hit, you automatically gain 1 critical, but we'll deal with criticals when we reach the damage section. So when you go in an action, you can perform a standard action. And these are attack, aggressive attack, charge, stand up, focus, recover from reeling, rally, guard, sprint, run, ready a weapon. Now these all have different effects. So, for example, your standard attack, which we'll deal with in a moment. An aggressive attack is an ordinary attack, but you gain a bonus d12 to your skill, but you are left reeling afterwards. Focus. To gain focus, you can interrupt somebody else's action. It's basically a way of delaying your action in this system. Recover from reeling. So if you've been reeling before that, you can recover from it and go in your next action. Rally allows you to go and support a friend, which allows you to add focus to your ally or remove them from reeling, remove confusion or fear from them. So to attack, we look at Jinrozu and we see his primary attack roll is a d8 and a d6. So we've got the d8 and a d6 and we roll them. Well, it's going to be against the opponent's defense. So he rolls and he gets a 6 and a 5. Now, Kamatoto has 2d6 for her attack. Now, if we look at defense, which is page 110, we can see they can do a counter-attack. Now, basically, they can roll their skill. So he has a 5 and a 6. She rolls 2d6. She gets a 3 and a 1. So she doesn't succeed. So he hits her with 2 successes because he outnumbered her attacks. So we can see that his attack overwhelmingly succeeds. The defender is hit and suffers a critical result. The defender suffers 1 critical for each success after the first. So it's a hit plus 1 critical. Now, if the attacker just succeeded, the defender would be hit and you'd roll damage as normal. If they tied, then the outcome was as uncertain. They can either retreat or they can both hit each other. The counterattack succeeds, the attacker is hit and roll damage. The counterattack overwhelmingly succeeds, the attacker is hit and suffers a critical result. So the two have clashed blades, and I'm afraid Jinrozu managed to get a solid hit on Kamatoto. So as the rules say here, the best defense is a strong offense. So you can counterattack, but there are also parries and dodges. Now, parries are very similar to counterattacks, but they have certain advantages. So if you have the gift of improved parry, you can parry any number of times, not just once, because you can only counterattack once. If your opponent's attacking at reach range and you only have a close weapon, then you can't counterattack, but you can still parry. And when lying down, counterattacks suffer a d12 penalty, but parries do not. And beyond that, you've got dodge, because there's no limit to the number of times a reactive combatant can dodge. And the results are tied up in that, but only a counterattack does the defender get to hit the opponent. And the other times, they just manage to avoid being hit themselves. Now, all weapons have their own damage. So, generally, we see here that Jinrozu, using his Kiseru, does 1d20 damage or 2d20 when he's using it in two hands. Kamatoto does 2d20 damage, or if she's throwing a shuriken, then 1d20 damage. Now, these are modified by criticals, because as we said before, you could use your focus, or you can gain extra, and you can get critical hits. Now, depending on the weapon, so Jinrozu got 1, he can do a concuss or a smash. So a concuss, bludgeoning weapons can rattle the brain and send foes sprawling. When claiming the concuss critical, your target is automatically sent reeling, regardless of any damage they suffer. And the other one was smash. Heavy blunt weapons have a sweet spot. If it hits the target right, it delivers an impressive results. When claiming the smash critical, include a bonus 2d20 damage. So not only does it do 2d20 damage in two hands, but if he scored a critical, then he can take the smash and he's rolling 4d20. So we'll take the smash critical. So he does 1d20 for handling his weapon. He gets 2d20 extra for his smash. So we're rolling 3d20. And we're rolling them against a target number of 6, which is Kamatoto's soak. So we're rolling an 8, which is 1 success. Another 8, which is 2 successes. And another 8, which is 3 successes. Now what does that mean? Well, if he'd failed all his dice rolls, if we turn to page 116, we can see damage scores no successes, scratched. Succeeds by 1, wounded. Succeeds by 2, crippled. Succeeds by 3, incapacitated. And succeeds by 4, devastated. Well, if you're scratched, then you get reeling. So you've been hit, you're sent reeling, and you need to recover, or you need a friend to help you recover from that effect. If you get wounded, well, you're sent reeling, and you suffer 1d20 extra on all further damage rolls against you. So not only have you taken a wound, but you're easier to affect in the future. In crippled, it makes no mention of being reeling, but it does say that you have a bonus d20 on all future damage rolls, just like being wounded, and you can only take these actions. Do a reckless attack, where you make a dash towards an opponent and attack, but are sent reeling afterwards. You can guard, or you can stagger, so you can stagger away from damage. And if you're incapacitated, like Kamatoto is, grievous harm indeed, incapacitated injury takes all but the hardiest combatants out of the fight. A damage roll that scores 3 hits against target soak gets an incapacitated. An incapacitated combatant instantly falls unconscious. And there are feats and things which allow you, but basically you're down. And then devastated, well, you're pretty much dead if you've received 4. But there are ways around that if the Games Master decides. Now, because health is only these 4 status levels, but they're dealt with on page 123 on recovery. So basically, you need to make rolls against target numbers depending on how much rest you take, whether you're taking a breather, where you don't get a healing roll, a proper rest, where you roll your body, your speed, your mind, and your will dice against target number depending on the wound, and a long rest where you maximize them. So if Kamatoto's only taking a short rest, then she'll be rolling her dice. Otherwise, she'll automatically get the maximum if she was taking a long rest. So a 6, an 8, a 6, and a 4. And they're against the target numbers here. So Kamatoto here was incapacitated to crippled. So the target number of healing is a 7 or a 5. If she was devastated to incapacitated, it'd be a 9 and a 6. Crippled to wounded, 5 and a 4. Wounded to no injury, 3 or a 2. But she's got a 7 and a 5, and she's got 1 8. But she needs a quota of 200 successes. So basically, she will need to rest for long enough to be able to get 200 successes to heal back up completely. Now, if she fails a roll completely by taking short rests and rolling for it, then I'm afraid she'll slip back down. Backsliding. A character that scores an overwhelming failure on their healing test suffers a backslide. The details of the backslide are up to the game's host. Ligaments can be torn, fevers worsen, wounds become infected. In any event, the character drops to the next worst injury status. So, doing a critical failure on a healing roll means that you would go from incapacitated to devastated and possibly die. But on the whole, you are making these rolls or taking automatic successes from them, or maximized rolls, and trying to get up to your quota to heal up your wound. So for a crippled character, then you're looking for 50 successes. And 5s and 4s, so she'll be getting 3 each time. 6, 6, and 8. So she'll be getting 3 successes, so going up 3 towards the quota of 50. Wounded or no injury, a 3 or a 2, well, she's going to be getting all 4 successes, so she'll be healing by 4 towards the quota of 10 to get rid of a wound. Experience is dealt with on page 125. And change of favored use or weapon costs 1 experience. Add 1 mark to a skill costs 5 experience. Buy a new gift costs 15. But you can do things like reducing your skills as you let those go away because you're not practicing old skills. And you can get, at the Games Master's agreement, 4 experience back. So losing a mark from a skill would give you 4 experience back when you spent 5 on it. So your character learnt basket weaving or whatever, decides to give it up, and they can spend the time and the brain power they learnt learning basket weaving to learn something else in time. So that is the Usagi Yojimbo Role-Playing Game by Sanguine Productions from 2005. Now, it's an interesting system. I think the initiative has a lot to go for it. It's not the standard. The focus system's quite interesting in handling ways of interrupting actions and changing the combat flow, although I do find the fact that players always go first to be a little odd, especially when they're being ambushed, although the rules do suggest that the Games Master can decide the sequence depending on circumstances, but that rule comes after already declaring that players go first. Otherwise, the combat's quite interesting. It does have these criticals which allow you to do interesting side effects. So when you get a good hit, you can often just do lots and lots of extra damage, but you can do side effects like staggering opponents, etc., which make combat a lot more interesting. But anyway, I've whittled on for quite long enough. Thank you very, very much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment below, because it does me massive favours with the YouTube algorithm. But please, be kind. But most of all, as always, you look after yourselves. And I'll catch you later. Bye now.